Hi and welcome to the My Future Business Show. My name is Rick Nusky and today I have the greatest of pleasure talking with Mr. Mo Latin. How are you, Mo?
Rick, I'm really good, thanks, mate. It's great to be on the call with you. I really appreciate taking this time out to explore whatever comes up through your questions and what shows up in our explorations of that. Yeah.
So Mo is actually one of two sides of a business, and we'll go into how this all sort of operates in a little bit. But to give a bit of scope to the call, Mo, tell us a little bit about you and your history and what makes you tick.
If I go back a few years, my passion was very much around music. I was a musician in my teens. I joined the music industry professionally in my early 20s. I trained as a sound engineer.
Yep.
I did that for 18 years or so. In the last 10 years of that, I was training people for the music industry. I was a trainer and assessor for both new unemployed entrants into the music industry as recording engineers,
Yep.
and also helping people who've been in the industry for many years and polishing up their skills in multi-track recording, sound theory, sound production, etc.
Right.
I moved from that in around 2004.
Yep.
And I discovered what the world often describes as personal development. So that's the world of people like Anthony Robbins was the first big name that I got introduced to. Now, It was quite fun. It was quite funny actually, because my girlfriend at the time was studying life coaching, and she came home one day and I was on my laptop on my computer making some music, mixing, doing whatever I was doing at the time because that was my thing.
Yeah.
And there she was in the room saying, coaching course, blah blah blah, various things about her coaching studies that she was doing. I wasn't that interested, and she talked about this big American guy who was coming over. And then she said Firewalk, and all of a sudden I was in. So anyway.
Sounds painful.
It was an interesting experience. Yeah. It's one of those things that many humans in many cultures have explored in different ways. And the Firewalk experience definitely got me hooked in this. But this is kind of the beginning of a big journey because I'd always been interested in psychology. I'd always been interested in relationships, really because my parents loved each other very much but fought like cat and dog for decades. So I didn't want to end up in that place. So I had a real interest in understanding why that happened and what I could do to live differently, I guess. And Tony's one of those guys that when you are introduced to him, you either kind of love him or hate him. He's one of these guys that, in my opinion, understands human behavior in such a profound way. And I've witnessed him do such incredibly deep work with people. But essentially, he opened my eyes to many areas in my own development, and particularly around the areas of masculine and feminine. Right. Which is something I've always been interested in. And that's actually been a key part of the work that I've been doing for the past few years. Where I'm at now, between then and now, I did from 2005 to about 2011, I did 7 years of event production. So I got into producing events like with people like Tony Robbins, John DeMartini, Bob Proctor, lots and lots of big names. So I had the pleasure and privilege of being paid to sit through thousands of hours of training, really high-level training, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
I also invested a lot of my time and money in that personally because I was fascinated. I was growing massively. I was challenging who I was. I was peeling back the layers that I'd taken on from society. And I really began to understand beliefs, values, conditioning, authenticity and inauthenticity, ways of living in many, many different ways. And my particular fascination was around masculine and feminine.
Right.
And this is really the core of the work I do now and with couples. And I work with my partner, Lisa, Lisa Page.
Yep.
And we have invested heavily in terms of time and money and everyday practice, which is actually the core of all of this. But understanding the principles of masculine and feminine are key to relationship work, which is what we do now. The masculine and feminine principles, as far as we're concerned, are both the cause of all problems and the solution to all problems, or the vast majority of problems that happen in relationships, simply because, as we know from the thousands of books and interviews and videos and workshops there are around each side, if you like, men and women understanding each other, and I'm reluctant to use the word side because it's not really appropriate, but men and women trying to understand each other is where the biggest conflicts and misunderstandings happen, and where also the deepest healing and connection can happen once you really begin to understand what's going on.
I look at the discussions that we've had, and it actually made me reflect on my current relationship. It's quite easy to get caught up in the day-to-day. I'm running a business. I'm so busy. I can't do this, or I can't do that. What is it about that need to be busy that disconnects people?
We live in an incredibly chaotic and busy world, and we live in a world that is very intellectual and very disembodied. And what I mean by that is we use our brains and our fingers a lot. We think a lot. We type a lot. We read a lot. And we spend most of our time sitting down, most of us, whether it's in an office or at a desk or traveling to and from or at a table or in front of a TV. But essentially, we live in a world that's very, very distracting. And that does several things. One of the things it does is it keeps us actually disassociated from deeper connection, but also deeper pain. There's many things that are going on in the world that are actually very hard to handle, and some of them are right in our face, which is our relationship. And many people operate on autopilot in relationships. You kind of have that excitement at the beginning, and you're discovering each other, and you're exploring your new partner, and you're exploring where things work and where things don't work, and where there's fire and passion and spark, and where there's kind of conflict. And after a few months or a few years, you kind of more or less work that out to a certain degree. And it's very easy once that happens to get into automatic responses every day, and to not be present, and to not take the time out to make sure that you're actually completely clear of all that stuff that can easily take up all your bandwidth, so that you can leave that behind and be fully there for your partner at some point during the day. Now, we all have jobs, a lot of people have kids, you have a whole ton of stuff going on. We have technology that's full of social media interactions and expectations, and the whole world is evolving rapidly in so many different directions, especially compared to even 50 years ago. There's so much more going on, and so much more that we're expected to take care of, that it's not a wonder at all that we feel very fragmented, we feel exhausted, we feel tired. Technology is exhausting in itself. I mean, just sitting in front of a screen for hours is very tiring. But if you don't flip that and take time out to get space from technology, to allow the mind to settle and empty, to get into your body, which is another key piece of our work, which is about embodiment, to actually get into your body. And that could be through things like yoga, martial arts, working out, dancing. It doesn't really matter what it, but using your body physically for periods of time. I'm not just talking about exercise for health. I'm talking about using your body so you've actually got one.
Something just came to mind then, Mo. I recall listening to Tony Robbins at one stage, and he said, motion equals emotion. And you can't take any benefit from emotion without that motion. You can't trigger it. So is this what we're sort of leaning into? Is this what we're talking about now?
This is one area. Look, Tony's the guy that kind of kicked it off for me in terms of my recent deep dive into personal development. And what Tony does is he teaches lessons around human interaction, why we get stuck in certain things, and how we can overcome our own challenges and blocks. And one of the things Tony teaches is something called the triad. And the triad is essentially three things. It's based on what you focus on, your internal or external language, and your physiology. And essentially, we tend to, all of us tend to get stuck in stuff. We get stuck in our own internal dramas. We get stuck in arguments with people. We get stuck in fears. We get stuck in all kinds of things, excuses. Okay. And Tony's triad is basically saying, look, at any one moment in time, you are focusing on something. You have some kind of internal or external language. You're either talking to yourself, talking down to yourself, or talking, perhaps in a derogative way to someone in an argument, or something's going on, and your body is in a certain shape. And what he's saying is, if you change any one of those three parts of the equation, your state changes. Once you master your emotions, you master your life. So when we feel depressed, we tend to hunch over. We tend to have negative thoughts going on, and perhaps self-talk. We get all miserable. We curl up in a dark room. All of these things are the kind of thing that might happen if we're in a depressed mood.
Right.
Now, all you've got to do is change one of those things. If you stand up, change your physiology, stand up and start to breathe fully, you're going to feel less depressed. If you start to use different internal language, you're going to change the way you feel. You're not going to feel so depressed.
Are we talking like self-talk?
Yeah, we're talking like, oh, you screwed up again, you idiot. What do you do that for? This kind of stuff. So when we're talking about the connection between motion and emotion, that's one aspect of it. It's hard. Here's another way to look at it. It's hard to be depressed if you're going for a brisk walk along the beach on a sunny day, and you're kind of up to the sky and forcing yourself to smile. If you do that, if you force yourself to come out of the dark room and go for a walk on the beachfront, wherever you happen to be, and you consciously practice doing that, you're breaking the previous pattern that was there, which is probably quite deep in your body. If you're the type of person that tends to get depressed, or tends to get angry, or tends to withdraw, or whatever it is, we tend to have emotions that we go to. We all do that. And in the bigger picture, in the bigger context of the work that I do, and I do with Lisa, it's very much about identifying those patterns. It's very much about us spending time with someone to hear them speak about what's going on in their life. And that's one part of the equation. But really what we're looking for is repetitive patterns, tonality, phraseology, and physical patterns that show up in a person's body that need attention. And when I talk about practice and embodiment, the key to change is practicing a new way of being. It's a bit like having a bad golf swing, right? You don't know you've got a bad golf swing. You might have an idea you've got a bad golf swing until your coach or one of your top mates who's a great player goes, did you know you happen to do this? You're leaning too far forward, your balance is on you. I don't play golf, but
Yeah, no, I understand the metaphor.
You know what I mean? Your balance is forward, your grip's wrong, your club's at an angle, whatever. Now, you might have been playing that way for 20 years and been doing okay. And this is a perfect parallel for relationships. You might have had a relationship that's doing okay for a while. You're kind of satisfied. The game's all right. You're getting okay results, right? But all of a sudden, the coach comes along and goes, hey, did you realize that you are leaning a bit too far forward? If you lean back just a little, you'll get a bit more swing. If you hold the club in this way, you get a bit more length on your shot.
Yeah.
If you angle your head this way, you'll get a bit more accuracy, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And it's only by someone external drawing attention to those habits and conditions and helping you refine those that you can reprogram your body to do that. Now, what tends to happen is we have deeply embodied patterns. By the time you reach your 30s, 40s, 50s, you've been doing the same stuff for a really long time.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time. It can take 5-10 years to undo a pattern that you've got where, for example, here's a typical thing. Let's say you and your partner have a thing about, I don't know what it might be. She might speak to you in a certain tone of voice that reminds you of the way your mum spoke to you when you were 9 because you did something wrong, and she used a certain language and a certain tone, and your partner happens to use the same tone, or something lands in your nervous system in the same way, you feel at some unconscious level that it has a connection with something in your past or something that you can relate now. That's a deeply embodied emotional pattern. And what might happen is when she says those words in that way and looks at you with that raised eyebrow that she does and pulls that certain face, your habit, through no fault of yours or hers, is to go, oh my God, I've done something wrong again. I'm going to withdraw into myself and become that shy little boy that I was all those years ago when that happened. Now, that's just a deeply embedded emotional response in you. What we might observe in the work that we do is that in progress.
Yeah.
And what we would say to you is exactly the same as the golf coach would say to the golf player, which is, hey, did you realize you were doing this? And they go, well, actually, no, I didn't. So what we would say is, hey, this is what happens when she happens to speak to you in this certain way, and she's not being antagonistic. She's not being antagonistic. It's just the way she happens to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you realize you responded in this way? So we go, okay, what would really serve you to help you break that pattern is, first of all, to recognize that when this equation comes up, because everything is an equation, when she communicates in this particular way, your response in that equation is this, and the result is you withdraw. So to change that equation, first of all, you recognize the equation. Secondly, you do something. We talked about the triad earlier. Something from the triad, for example, which would break that pattern. So instead of
like a body posture change.
Yeah, exactly. There's a woman, I forget her name now, but she did a TED talk on body posture and body language.
Right.
And she said that if you do the Superman pose, if you stand tall and strong with your hands on your hips for 2 minutes a day, it affects your psychology.
Just thinking about it. It's
Yeah. I forget. There was a particular benefit that she said it had. I can't remember what it was right now, but I'm sure if you looked up TED Talk, body language, Superman pose, you'd find it. The key is to, first of all, become aware. Secondly, understand what you personally need to make that change, because not all golf players need the same coaching, right? So what you personally need to make that change in that situation, in that equation, when your partner does X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And then you need to practice. So practice is the key to everything. And here's the thing. Everything you do is practice. This is an incredibly simple but incredibly powerful phrase, because the way you are sitting right now, the way you are breathing, the way you're holding your spine, the amount of tension in your body, the amount of relaxation in your body, the amount of air that's filling you, and to what degree, whether you're shallow breathing or breathing belly breathing, the awareness you have in your arms and legs, your fingers and toes, the awareness you have in your surroundings, all of these things are practice. So you could be practicing shallow breathing, being hunched over, and having a slightly chaotic mind, because that happens to be your tendency in everyday life. Because if we look back to something we talked about earlier, because we live in such a chaotic, distracting, demanding world where we have all this stuff going on that we need to pay attention to. You run your own business, blah, 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 blah. You've got all this stuff going. It's very easy to just do all day long. We're a human being, although we spend most of our time doing. Right? In a lot of the events that I attended, we would talk about be, do, and have. Who do you have to be to do what you need to do to have what you want in your life? Okay? And we quite often overlook who do you have to be, or how do you have to show up in each moment. And this is at the core of intimate relationship with your partner, but actually it's at the core of every relationship. Your relationship with your business partners, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your mates. What we too easily overlook is that how we show up, how we speak, how much we are available, how relaxed and present we are rather than tense and distracted. All of this affects our interaction with people. All of this affects our relationship with people. And men in particular really, really overlook this. Women are incredibly sensitive, and I'm generalizing massive here. Of course, there are men that are very sensitive. There are, you know, we're all humans, we're all individuals.
Yeah.
But the feminine in us is the part of us that is the more intuitive, the more sensitive, the more relational, the more in tune with the subtleties in life. Men tend to be, the masculine tends to be more about getting shit done, being on task, structure. And in that, we tend to, it's easy to overlook relationship. You know, when you want to get shit done, the last thing you want to do is pick up the phone and talk to someone who's called you randomly. You're like, I'm on task. And this applies to women as well. It's actually about letting go of stuff that's in the way and consciously doing the what you need to do so that, and this is individually and together, so that you are clear, right? We talked earlier about distraction. Distraction gets in the way. Chaos gets in the way. Stuff that needs doing gets in the way. And we need to take care of that stuff. I'm talking both in terms of practical things in life, in parenting, in running a business, in taking care of yourself, on a physical and health level. But if we're coming back to emotions, it's really important to do your own work so that you are taking care of your own stuff, your stuff that comes up. Now, therapy is something that some people love to do, and some people think, well, why should I do therapy? Wrong with me, I don't need to go through a therapist. To a therapist or doing some kind of therapy is not necessarily something you need to do because there's something wrong with you. It's not about that in my world. But what I'm talking about is more generic work which can help you just release tensions in the body, become aware of associations that you have that are linked to your physiology. So, for example, I went to London a couple of years ago and I did a few sessions. I did some craniosacral therapy sessions, which were really interesting. The more interesting one for me was something called, I'm sure the name will come to me. I worked with this really amazing and passionate French woman who helped me identify a link between the tilt of my pelvis and the way I breathed, and the fact that I would shut down when I talked about certain subjects around my childhood, and particularly around money and security. It was really interesting because she'd ask me all these questions, and she'd do exactly what I talked about a few minutes ago, which was, did you realize that when you talked about these things, your chest collapses, you breathe more shallowly, and your pelvis tilts back, and you kind of go into this self-enforced sleep. It's like you cop out of the conversation.
She was watching your physiology change.
Exactly. So it was only by doing that therapy, and I chose to do the therapy because I knew I had stuff to deal with. I'm like, okay, I've done a lot of personal development work. I've done a lot of workshops. I've done a lot of programs. I've done a lot of insightful questions, deep work over many years, and I still know there was more to deal with because there's always the next layer. I just wanted to see what came up, and this is what came up. And since then, I've been able to notice my pelvic tilt when it happens, and what happens to my psychology and my emotions, and the fact that I do observe that I tend to want to withdraw and shut down in certain situations, and my pelvis does this, and the whole chain reaction kicks off. And unless I know that happens, and I straighten my spine and retilt my pelvis and breathe more deeply, I'm just stuck in that pattern.
So you notice it as a trigger now.
Exactly. And what is most potent about this is that I can actually attend to it. My practice all day long, I must retilt my pelvis 50 times all day long because it's partly bad posture. We have to look at life holistically. Anything that's going on at home is bound to affect your business. And for the feminine, relationship is at the center of their world. Okay, the masculine men, and I'm generalizing massively here again.
Yeah, I understand.
And we're just talking about your stereotypical
Typical. Yeah.
heterosexual male-female couple, whereas of course there are many
others.
variations
Yeah,
on
of
that.
course there is. Yeah.
So in that example, the feminine, the woman, has relationship as the center of her world. It's as simple as that. That is what is most important to women, or to the vast majority of women, and to the vast majority of men. What they're doing in their life ultimately is really where their focus is. Now, relationship is high priority for many men, but it doesn't tend to be top of the list for most men. Okay. Now, what this means is that in women's world, even when women are running businesses, they tend to have more focus and more time and more bandwidth for relationship. It's always the women. It's funny, in the work that we do, Lisa enrolls women into her programs way more easily than we can get men to join our couples programs.
And that should come of no surprise, I guess, given what you've just said.
Yeah. But we know this. I mean, for men, relationship tends to be something on the tick list, on the to-do list. I really ought to attend to that one day. I really ought to give it some time, give it some thought, right? But I've got to get this stuff. I've got this deal coming up. I've got this project to do. I've got to nail this thing, you know. And eventually one day they might get round to the relationship. And that depends on how important it is or how bad it gets and how much it affects the rest of your world. But you're absolutely right. There is a direct correlation between the boardroom and the bedroom. Okay. And men tend to focus on the boardroom and not on the bedroom, despite the fact that, as the stereotypical comment may go, you know, men are all about sex.
Yeah.
You know, men are only interested in one thing. But the work and the attention and the energy that needs to be given in a long-term relationship to actually experience the depth of relationship and connection and intimacy and sexual exploration that's possible just by doing a little bit of daily work. It's just not, most men, first of all, aren't even aware that it's possible to do that. And secondly, it's another thing to add to the list. It's like, I've got to do more work. Again, it comes back to patterns. You know, we get stuck in these patterns after years. Here's another thing that's interesting. You know, relationship and attraction is built on opposites. So opposites attract, masculine and feminine, and it doesn't actually matter who is playing the masculine and feminine. So again, typically speaking, the man would play the masculine in the example we're talking about, and the woman would play the feminine. However, there may be times when she's actually better at being in charge of in certain areas and actually directing, making decisions, leading the way, and he actually just kind of goes, okay, I'm cool to do whatever you want. I'm fine with that. Okay. Now, it's interesting when we start talking about this area because it's quite often misunderstood when you start talking about masculine and feminine. Men, especially Australian men, as I've discovered. I mean, I'm from London, and I think men in Europe, London, are a little more free to speak around relationship and emotions. They're just on an average level. It seems to be a little more relaxation around that. But men in general don't like to speak about these things. We don't like to speak about emotions. Okay, we tend to climb it up, shut it down. We think it's something. A lot of BS in society about talking about emotions is not manly. Okay, it's not serving us it's not serving us in society. It's not serving us in relationship to think and live that way. We have to attend to these things because we are emotional beings.
Yeah.
You know, we live in a society that has many taboos and beliefs that actually get in the way of our own growth, of our own connection, of our own evolution, of our own relationships, of our own development, of our own truth. I mean, all of these things. And, you know, the work that I've done over the years, the conversations I've had, I've spoken with people about literally anything you can think about, from rape to child abuse to domestic violence. All kinds of stuff comes up in the work we do because it's what's going on in people's lives. Now, That's not where the majority of people live. The
No.
majority of people live, once you've been in a relationship for 10, 15, 20 years, you've got kids, people in that world tend to live in a relationship that's kind of lost its passion. The sex life has kind of died or dwindled. The sameness has come in. I talked a minute ago about the difference in relationship. It's the attraction. When you become parents, you have to operate both in masculine and feminine. You sometimes have to be really strict, and sometimes you have to be really compassionate. So those are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. And really, the work that we do is to help people communicate more freely, be more in touch with what's going on for them emotionally, speak about that, speak their truth. Whether that's in privacy to me, in a conversation just man to man, which I have a lot of these conversations with men, are very often about all the same subjects. The same things come up over and over again with pretty much all the men I work with. And with all the couples we work with, it's very often the same core issues. So what I'm saying in that is it's really important to understand that although men in particular may not want to address or speak about or reveal the shit that's going on in their life, it's like, this is going on, I don't know how to handle it, but I really don't want to speak with someone else about it. It's too big, it's too shameful, they're going to be judged, etc., etc. You've just got to drop all that, because it's going to eat you up inside. It's going to, it's demoralizing. It drains your energy. It fills your head with distraction. You can't actually get on with the business of life. You can't get on with developing a business. You can't get on with diving deeper into who you are, let alone who you are in your partnership. You can't actually explore the bigger part of how you can show up in the world and how you can serve your company, your employees, your clients. All of these things are related, because in the background there's tension, there's dissatisfaction, there's frustration, there's anger, there's upset, there's whatever it is going on.
That was a big driver, in fact, of having you on the call, is to help others who are, having an imbalance of sorts, or are not quite sure what's wrong, not quite sure what they need to do to improve their current relationship, or are just wanting to build on a great relationship that they're already having. Mo, where can people find you, and what is the name of your business?
If you want to get in contact with me directly, and this is for my work and more specifically with men, you can go to molatin.com. So that is M-O and then Latin as in South America, MOLATIN.com. And for the couples work, we have a website set up with my partner Lisa Page at livinglovingdeeper.com.
Great. Look, what we do, Mo, is we do a post, and we have the recording made available on that post in the My Future Business news feed. If you don't mind, I'd like to put a couple of links to those websites in our posts, and encourage men, women to come and see you. Would that be okay? That
would be great. Yeah, thank you. We actually have something that couples have found very, very useful in the past, which is something that we call a relationship health check, which is 45 questions divided into 3 sections, essentially A-B questions that help you really identify where the strengths are in your relationship, and also what part of your relationship needs attention. It's about, I don't know, it takes about 8 minutes, perhaps 8-10 minutes. Quick A-B answers. You just tick a box, and at the end of it, it gives you an indication of there's a score that essentially says, look, in this area you're great, in these areas you really need to take a look at these areas if you want a deep, rich, fulfilling, satisfying, long-term relationship where you're both growing, contributing, and evolving together, and exploring as deeply as you can.
That is an amazing business that you have there. I know, and I say business, but I'm always aware of people's drivers, and the level of commitment that you have through life experience and self-learning and development is quite apparent, Mo, and thank you so much for coming on the My Future Business show today.
Look, you're really welcome, Rick. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about this. It's an area that we don't pay enough attention to as society and as individuals and couples. You know, we are so distracted by life, and we have so much emphasis. It's quite ironic, really. We have so much emphasis on learning. We go to driving lessons. We learn to drive. We go to college. We learn an apprenticeship. We learn a skill. We learn a business mindset. We learn X, Y, Z. All these things that we study and practice, and we get certification, qualifications. Okay, but at the core of all of that is relationship.
Yeah.
All of it. It doesn't matter whether it's relationship for intimacy or for sex or for business or for parenting. It's all relationship, but we don't get taught the principles of relating,
No.
and
Well,
we don't get to practice, and that's what's really key.
Well, on that note, I would say that if you're listening to this podcast now, certainly reach out to Mo, and I'm confident that you will feel very comfortable having an initial discussion with him. I've actually completed the relationship health check myself. It's very revealing, very informative, and it's maybe the first step towards a better relationship for you. So again, thanks, Mo, and I will speak with you again soon.
Rick, thank you again. It's been a real pleasure.